Simone Crawford's hands trembled as she adjusted the white lilies around Isabella Whitmore's casket. The funeral parlor felt suffocating, filled with the scent of expensive flowers and the quiet sobs of mourners who barely knew the young woman lying so still in silk and pearls. "Mama, something ain't right," Jamal whispered, tugging at his mother's black dress sleeve. At 16, her son had always been too observant for his own good, but today his dark eyes held something that made Simone's stomach clench with worry. "Hush now, baby. Show some respect," she murmured, but her own heart was racing. 15 years she'd worked for the Whitmore family, cleaning their massive estate, watching Isabella grow from a spoiled 8-year-old into a troubled but kind young woman. This felt wrong. All of it felt wrong. The accident had happened so fast. One day Isabella was there, laughing in the garden where Simone tended the roses, talking about her plans to open a community center in their old neighborhood. The next day Richard Whitmore was calling to say his daughter was gone. Car accident. Head trauma. Gone. But Jamal kept staring at the casket with that look that meant he was working something out in his mind. The same look he got when he was solving complex math problems that stumped kids twice his age. "Look at her hands, Mama," he whispered so quietly only she could hear. "Look real close." Simone's breath caught. She'd dressed Isabella for special occasions before, helped her get ready for galas and charity events. Those hands? Isabella always wore her grandmother's ring on her right hand. Always. A delicate sapphire that never came off because it was too small for her finger now. The hands in the casket were bare. "Oh my God," Simone breathed, her knees nearly giving out. "The fingernails too," Jamal continued, his voice steady but urgent. "Remember how she always bit them? Even when she got those fancy manicures for events? These nails are perfect. Too perfect." The room seemed to spin around Simone. She gripped her son's arm, trying to stay upright as the implications crashed over her like a wave. If this wasn't Isabella in the casket, then where was the real Isabella Whitmore? "We have to stop this," she whispered, looking around frantically at the gathering crowd of mourners, the priest preparing for the service, Richard Whitmore standing like a broken statue at the front of the room. "How, Mama? Who's gonna believe the maid and her son over a man like Mr. Whitmore?" The question hit her like a slap. How could she, a woman who cleaned toilets and folded laundry, challenge a man who owned half the city? But as she looked at the stranger's hands resting peacefully in Isabella's expensive casket, she knew she had no choice. "I don't know, baby," she said, pulling Jamal closer. "But we have to find a way. If Isabella's alive somewhere, she needs us." The organ music began to play, and mourners started filling the pews. Somewhere in this room full of flowers and tears and expensive black clothing, someone knew the truth about what had really happened to Isabella Whitmore. And Simone Crawford, despite every instinct screaming at her to stay quiet and keep her job, was going to find out what it was. Even if it destroyed everything she'd worked for. The funeral service felt like a nightmare that wouldn't end. Simone sat in the back row with Jamal, watching Richard Whitmore deliver a eulogy for a daughter who might still be breathing somewhere. Her hands were clenched so tightly in her lap that her nails left marks on her palms. Every word felt like a lie. Every tear from the assembled mourners felt misplaced. And through it all, Jamal kept taking notes in the small notebook he always carried, writing down details that didn't make sense. "The priest keeps looking at his watch," Jamal whispered. "And Mr. Whitmore won't look at the casket. Not once." Simone had noticed that too. In 15 years of working for the family, she'd seen Richard Whitmore face down business rivals, hostile board meetings, and family crises with the same steely determination. But today he looked like a man being tortured. After the service, as people filed out to their expensive cars, Simone made her decision. "Mr. Whitmore," she called out, her voice carrying across the funeral parlor parking lot. "I need to speak with you." He turned, his face drawn in gray. "Simone, this isn't the time. It's about Isabella." The words came out stronger than she felt. "About the woman in that casket who ain't your daughter." The color drained from his already pale face. For a moment she thought he might collapse right there on the asphalt. Then his businessman mask slipped back into place. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Her hands, Mr. Whitmore. Her fingernails. The ring that's been on her finger since she was 14. That woman in there? That's not Isabella." Richard looked around frantically, making sure no one else was within earshot. The last of the mourners were driving away, leaving just the three of them standing in the gathering dusk. "You're grieving too," he said, but his voice shook. "Sometimes our minds play tricks." "Where is she?" Simone's voice cut through his excuse like a knife. "Where is Isabella?" The man who had built an empire through sheer force of will crumpled before her eyes. His shoulders sagged, his hands shook, and when he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know. The admission hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. The hospital called, he continued, the words tumbling out now like he couldn't stop them. Said she was brain dead. Said there was no hope. They needed me to sign papers, make arrangements. I couldn't bring myself to see her like that. So you never saw the body, Jamal said, understanding flooding his young face. The funeral director, Henderson, he handled everything. Said it would be easier for me, less traumatic. When I got there to identify, he said she was too damaged from the accident, that I shouldn't remember her that way. Simone felt sick. Someone played you, Mr. Whitmore? Someone wanted you to think Isabella was dead. But why? Richard's voice broke completely. Why would someone do that to my little girl? Before Simone could answer, headlights swept across the parking lot. A black sedan pulled up and two men in expensive suits got out. They moved with the kind of casual menace that made Simone instinctively step in front of Jamal. Mr. Whitmore, the taller man called out. Everything all right here? Fine, Henderson. Just saying goodbye. Henderson, the funeral director who had been so helpful, so understanding about the arrangements. The man who had convinced a grieving father not to see his own daughter's body. Good, Henderson said, his smile not reaching his eyes. Wouldn't want any complications. This has been hard enough on everyone. His gaze swept over Simone and Jamal, and she could feel the threat in it as clearly as if he'd spoken it aloud. We should all go home now, Henderson continued. Let the dead rest in peace. But as the funeral director and his companion drove away, Simone knew that whoever was in that casket wasn't at peace. And neither would she be until she found out what had really happened to Isabella Whitmore. Mama, Jamal whispered as they watched the taillights disappear. I think we just painted targets on our backs. Simone pulled her son close, feeling the weight of what they'd stumbled into settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. But somewhere out there, a young woman who had showed her nothing but kindness might be fighting for her life. And Simone Crawford had never backed down from a fight in her life. Simone barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Isabella's face, heard her laugh, remembered the way the young woman would sneak down to the kitchen late at night to talk about her dreams of helping kids in underserved communities. At dawn, she was dressed and ready. Jamal found her in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. You're gonna do something dangerous, aren't you? He asked, settling into the chair across from her. I'm gonna do something right, she corrected. Big difference. I'm coming with you. No, baby. This is adult business now. Jamal fixed her with the same stubborn look he'd inherited from her. Isabella used to help me with my college applications. She spent her own money to buy me textbooks when she found out we couldn't afford them. She treated me like family, mama. Like I mattered. The reminder hit Simone right in the chest. Isabella had been different from other wealthy people she'd worked for. She learned the names of every staff member, remembered birthdays, asked about families. When Jamal had been struggling with advanced calculus, Isabella had hired a tutor and pretended it was a gift from the family's education fund. All right, Simone said finally. But you stay close, and if I say run, you run. No arguments. Their first stop was Mercy General Hospital, where Isabella had supposedly died. Simone had cleaned enough houses to know that secrets always left traces, and hospitals were no different. The information desk was staffed by a tired-looking woman with graying hair and kind eyes. Her name tag read Beverly Jones. Excuse me, Simone said, approaching carefully. I'm looking for information about a patient who was brought in 3 days ago. Isabella Whitmore? Beverly's expression shifted immediately. She glanced around nervously before leaning forward. You family? I worked for the family. Raised that girl since she was 8 years old. Something in Simone's voice must have convinced her, because Beverly gestured for them to step aside from the busy desk. That whole situation was strange, she whispered. Girl comes in from a car accident, head trauma, but her vitals were stable. Then suddenly she's brain dead and being transferred to a private facility upstate. All very hush-hush. Transferred where? Hillcrest Medical Center. But here's the thing. The paperwork was rushed through by some hotshot doctor I'd never seen before. Dr. Morrison. Claimed he was taking over her case for the family. Jamal pulled out his notebook. What did this Dr. Morrison look like? Tall, white guy, expensive suit. More like a businessman than a doctor if you ask me. And he had these two assistants who looked more like bodyguards. Simone's blood ran cold. That sounded exactly like Henderson and his companion from the funeral parlor. "Beverly," Simone said urgently, "is there any way to find out if Isabella Whitmore is still alive at Hillcrest?" The older woman looked around again, then made a decision. "My shift ends in an hour. Meet me in the parking garage, level 3. I might know someone who can help." An hour felt like a lifetime. Simone and Jamal sat in their old Honda, watching hospital staff come and go, both lost in their own thoughts. "What if we're wrong?" Jamal asked finally. "What if Isabella really is dead and we're just making things worse for Mr. Whitmore?" "Then we'll have tried to do the right thing," Simone replied. "Sometimes that's all you can do." Beverly appeared right on schedule, looking nervous but determined. With her was a younger black woman in scrubs. "This is Dr. Patricia Hayes," Beverly said. "She's a friend and she's got contacts at Hillcrest." Dr. Hayes studied them both carefully. "Beverly says you think Isabella Whitmore might still be alive?" Simone explained about the hands, the ring, the rushed funeral arrangements. As she talked, Dr. Hayes's expression grew more serious. "I know Dr. Morrison," she said finally. "Real name is Dr. Mitchell Morrison, and he's been involved in some questionable cases before. Medical fraud, insurance scams. If he's involved, then Isabella's in real danger. Can you find out if she's at Hillcrest?" "I can try. But if I'm right about Morrison, then this goes deeper than just a fake funeral. Someone wants Isabella Whitmore to disappear permanently." As they drove home, Simone felt the weight of what they were up against settling in her bones. This wasn't just about stopping a funeral anymore. This was about saving a life. And somewhere in a medical facility an hour north of the city, Isabella Whitmore might be counting on them to figure it out in time. Dr. Patricia Hayes called the next morning at 6 a.m., her voice tight with urgency. "I found her," she said without preamble. "Isabella Whitmore is alive, but she's in a medically induced coma at Hillcrest. According to their records, she's listed as Jane Doe, and Dr. Morrison has been treating her under a false identity." Simone's knees went weak with relief and terror all at once. Is she going to be okay? That's the problem. The medical records show she should have woken up days ago, but Morrison keeps adjusting her medication. If I'm reading this right, he's keeping her unconscious deliberately. Why would he do that? I don't know yet, but I have a friend at Hillcrest who's willing to help us get more information. Can you meet me there this afternoon? After hanging up, Simone sat in her kitchen trying to process everything. Isabella was alive. That should have been good news, but the reality of what Dr. Morrison was doing made her feel sick. "Mama, there's something else," Jamal said, looking up from his laptop. "I've been researching Dr. Morrison and Henderson's funeral home. They've worked together before." He turned the laptop screen toward her, showing a series of newspaper articles. 3 other cases in the past 5 years. Young people from wealthy families, all declared dead after suspicious accidents, all handled by Henderson's funeral home. But here's the weird part. In each case, the families received large insurance payouts within weeks of the funerals. Simone's blood went cold as the implications sank in. They're killing people for insurance money, or making it look like they're dead so someone else can collect. But why Isabella? Her father's already rich. The question haunted Simone as they drove to Hillcrest Medical Center. The facility looked legitimate from the outside, clean, modern, with manicured grounds. But knowing what was happening inside made it feel sinister. Dr. Hayes met them in the parking lot with a young nurse named Angela. "Angela works in the ICU," Dr. Hayes explained. "She's been taking care of the patient listed as Jane Doe." "That girl's been fighting to wake up for days," Angela said, her voice shaking. "But every time she starts to come around, Dr. Morrison increases her sedation. It ain't right." "Can we see her?" Simone asked. Angela nodded. "Morrison's not here today and the other staff thinks you're family. But we need to be quick." The ICU was quiet except for the steady beeping of machines. Angela led them to a room at the end of the hall, and Simone's heart broke at what she saw. Isabella lay surrounded by tubes and monitors, her face pale but peaceful. She looked smaller than Simone remembered, fragile in a way that made Simone want to scoop her up and carry her home. "Oh, baby girl," Simone whispered, taking Isabella's hand. The sapphire ring was there, hidden under medical tape, but Simone could feel its familiar shape. "We're gonna get you out of here." "Look at this," Jamal said, studying the chart at the foot of the bed. "According to this, Jane Doe has no family, no insurance, and no one looking for her. That's how they've been able to keep her here so long." Dr. Hayes frowned as she reviewed the medications. "This combination of drugs, he's not just keeping her unconscious. He's making sure she can't remember anything when she wakes up." Remember what? Simone asked, but even as she said it, she knew. Isabella had seen something, knew something that someone desperately wanted kept secret. I need to make some calls, Dr. Hayes said. If we're going to expose this, we need evidence that will hold up in court. But as they prepared to leave, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Angela's face went white. That's Morrison, she whispered. He's not supposed to be here today. They could hear voices approaching, Morrison and at least 2 other people. Quick, Angela said, pushing them toward a supply closet. Hide in here until they pass. Through the crack in the door, Simone watched Dr. Morrison enter Isabella's room with Henderson and another man she didn't recognize. She should have been dead by now, Morrison was saying. The family's getting impatient. Then increase the dosage again, Henderson replied coldly. We've come too far to let her wake up and ruin everything. What about the funeral? People saw her buried. The funeral was perfect, the third man said. Richard Whitmore thinks his daughter is dead. The insurance company is processing a $20 million claim, and our client gets what they wanted. All we need to do is make sure this one never wakes up to tell anyone the truth. Simone's blood turned to ice. They were talking about murdering Isabella to cover up their scheme. But who was their client? Who wanted Isabella Whitmore dead badly enough to fake her funeral and steal her life? As the men left the room, still talking in low voices, Simone made her decision. They couldn't wait for Dr. Hayes to build a legal case. Isabella's time was running out. It was time to take matters into their own hands. That night, Simone couldn't eat, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but pace her small living room while Jamal researched on his laptop. The image of Isabella lying helpless in that hospital bed, while men in expensive suits planned her murder, haunted every breath. I found something, Jamal said suddenly, his voice tight with excitement. The third man with Morrison and Henderson? I think I know who he is. He turned his laptop toward her, showing a corporate website. Thomas Brennan, lawyer for Whitmore Industries. He handles all the family's legal affairs, including life insurance policies. So he'd know exactly how much Isabella's death would be worth. $20 million according to what we heard. But here's the thing, Mama. Isabella changed her will 6 months ago. Instead of everything going to her father, she set up a trust for community development projects. Brennan was fighting the change. The pieces were starting to come together in Simone's mind, forming a picture that made her sick. If Isabella dies before the trust takes effect, who gets the money? According to the old will, it would go to her father. But if something happened to him too, it would go to whoever had power of attorney. Simone felt the blood drain from her face. Brennan's been playing the long game. He needs Isabella dead to trigger the insurance payout, then something happens to Mr. Whitmore and he controls everything. The phone rang, making them both jump. Dr. Hayes's voice was urgent when Simone answered. Morrison's scheduled to lose Isabella tomorrow morning, she said without preamble. Angela overheard him telling the staff that the Jane Doe patient is being transferred to a long-term care facility, but the paperwork doesn't match any real facility. She's going to disappear. We have to get her out of there tonight. Simone, what you're talking about is kidnapping. Even if we're right about everything, we could go to prison. And if we're wrong, we go to prison. But if we do nothing, Isabella dies. Simone's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. I've been taking care of that girl for 15 years. I'm not stopping now. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Angela's working the night shift, Dr. Hayes said finally. If you're really going to do this, she can help. But once we move Isabella, there's no going back. After hanging up, Simone looked at her son, who was watching her with a mixture of pride and terror. This is crazy, Mama. I know, baby. But sometimes crazy is all you got left. They spent the next 2 hours planning. Jamal mapped out the hospital layout, identified security camera blind spots, and figured out the best route to move an unconscious patient without being detected. Simone gathered supplies, blankets, a wheelchair she borrowed from their neighbor, and her old nursing aid certification from before Jamal was born. At midnight, they arrived at Hillcrest. Dr. Hayes was waiting in the parking lot with a van she'd borrowed from her church. Angela's cleared a path to the service elevator, she reported. But we only have about a 15-minute window before the next security round. Inside the hospital, Angela met them with a wheelchair and a stack of discharge papers she'd forged. Room 314, she whispered. I've already disconnected most of her monitoring equipment. The portable oxygen tank should last about an hour. Isabella looked so fragile when they transferred her to the wheelchair that Simone's heart clenched. but her pulse was strong and her breathing was steady. "Where are we taking her?" Angela asked as they moved through the darkened hallways. "Somewhere safe," Simone said. "Somewhere they'll never think to look." The service elevator felt like it took forever. Every second, Simone expected alarms to start blaring, security guards to come running, their desperate plan to fall apart. But they made it to the parking garage without incident. Dr. Hayes had the van running, and within minutes, they were driving through the night with Isabella unconscious in the back seat. "Now what?" Dr. Hayes asked as they put distance between themselves and the hospital. Simone looked back at Isabella's peaceful face and made another decision that would change everything. Now we wake her up and find out what she knows. Because somewhere in Isabella Whitmore's drugged mind was the key to exposing the conspiracy that had stolen her life. And Simone Crawford was going to make sure she got the chance to use it, even if it meant risking everything she had left in the world. Dr. Hayes had a small clinic in the city where she sometimes treated patients who couldn't afford regular hospital care. It wasn't much, just 3 rooms and a converted brownstone, but it had the medical equipment they needed to safely bring Isabella back to consciousness. "This is going to take time," Dr. Hayes warned as she prepared 4 fluids and monitoring equipment. "Morrison's been keeping her heavily sedated for days. Her system needs to clear gradually, or she could have seizures." Simone sat beside Isabella's bed, holding her hand and talking to her like she used to when Isabella was little and had nightmares. "Come on back to us, baby girl," she whispered. "You got people who love you waiting for you to open those eyes." Jamal was stationed by the window, watching for any suspicious activity on the street below. They all knew it was only a matter of time before Morrison and his people realized Isabella was gone. "Mama," Jamal said softly, "what if she can't remember anything? What if the drugs damaged her memory permanently?" "Then we figure out another way," Simone replied, but the same fear had been eating at her. Without Isabella's testimony, they had no proof of the conspiracy beyond their own suspicions. It was nearly dawn when Isabella's fingers twitched in Simone's hand. Her eyelids fluttered, and she made a soft sound that was somewhere between a moan and a sigh. "Isabella?" Dr. Hayes checked her pulse and pupils. "Can you hear me, honey? You're safe now." Isabella's eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused. She looked around the unfamiliar room, her gaze finally settling on Simone's face. "Mrs. Crawford." Her voice was hoarse from days of intubation. "I'm right here, baby. You're safe." What happened to me?" Isabella tried to sit up, but Dr. Hayes gently pressed her back down. "Take it slow. You've been unconscious for almost a week." As Dr. Hayes explained about the accident and the drugs, Simone watched emotions play across Isabella's face, confusion, fear, and then something that looked like recognition. "The car accident," Isabella said suddenly. "It wasn't an accident." The room went silent except for the soft beeping of the heart monitor. "What do you remember?" Dr. Hayes asked gently. "I was driving home from a meeting with Thomas Brennan. He'd been pressuring me to change my will back, said the community trust was a mistake. When I refused." Isabella's voice trailed off as the memories came flooding back. "Take your time," Simone said, squeezing her hand. "I was stopped at a red light when someone rear-ended me hard. When I got out to check the damage, there were 2 men waiting. One of them had something in his hand, a needle. I tried to run, but—" Isabella's breathing became rapid and shallow as the panic set in. Dr. Hayes quickly adjusted her to give her a mild sedative. "They injected me with something. I remember falling and then waking up strapped to a hospital bed. There was a man in a white coat, not a real doctor, I could tell. He kept asking me questions about my will, about what I'd told people." "Dr. Morrison," Jamal said grimly. "He said they needed to make sure I hadn't compromised their plans. When I wouldn't answer, he said it didn't matter. That everyone already thought I was dead and soon I would be." The confirmation of what they'd suspected hit Simone like a physical blow. They had tried to murder Isabella for money, and when that failed, they'd decided to finish the job slowly and quietly. "We have to call the police," Dr. Hayes said. "No," Isabella said, struggling to sit up again. "Brennan has contacts everywhere. The police, the courts, the hospital administration. That's how he's gotten away with this for so long." "Then what do we do?" Simone asked. Isabella looked at each of them in turn. The woman who had raised her, the teenager who had risked everything to save her, and the doctor who had thrown away her career to help a stranger. "We expose them," she said, her voice growing stronger. "But we need evidence they can't deny or cover up." "How?" Isabella's eyes lit up with the same determination Simone remembered from when she was a child. planning elaborate schemes to help the staff or fix problems around the estate. Brennan thinks I'm dead. Morrison thinks I've disappeared. Henderson thinks he pulled off the perfect crime. But they're going to have to meet soon to figure out what went wrong. She looked directly at Simone. And when they do, we're going to be there to record every word. It was dangerous. It was probably illegal. And it was their only chance to make sure Isabella Whitmore stayed alive long enough to reclaim her life. Simone smiled for the first time in days. Tell me what you need, baby girl. We're gonna bring these men down. Isabella's plan was audacious and terrifying in equal measure. They would use her own funeral as bait, drawing Morrison, Henderson, and Brennan together where they could be recorded confessing to their crimes. The burial is supposed to happen tomorrow, Isabella explained, now sitting up in bed and looking more like her old self despite the hospital gown and foreline. Brennan will want to be there to make sure everything goes smoothly. Morrison and Henderson will need to coordinate their stories in case anyone asks questions. Dr. Hayes looked skeptical. And you think they'll just confess everything in public? Not in public. But Brennan's paranoid about electronic communications. He always insists on face-to-face meetings for sensitive business. They'll meet somewhere private after the burial to plan their next moves. Jamal was already thinking ahead. How do we find out where they're meeting? Isabella's smile was grim. Because I know exactly where Brennan goes when he wants to have untraceable conversations. There's a private dining room at the Whitmore Club that he books under a false name. He thinks no one knows about it. How do you know? Because I've been investigating him for months. I suspected he was embezzling from the family foundation, but I never imagined it went this deep. Over the next few hours, they refined their strategy. Dr. Hayes would stay with Isabella at the clinic, monitoring her recovery and serving as backup if things went wrong. Simone and Jamal would attend the burial, then stake out the Whitmore Club to record whatever Brennan and his co-conspirators discussed. This is dangerous, Simone said for the 100th time as they prepared to leave. If they catch us. They won't, Isabella said firmly. Because they think they've won. Overconfident criminals make mistakes. The burial was a smaller affair than the funeral service had been. Richard Whitmore looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past week, standing beside the grave with hollow eyes and trembling hands. Simone's heart broke watching him grieve for a daughter who was actually alive and recovering just across town. He deserves to know, she whispered to Jamal as they watched from a distance. Soon, her son replied. Once we have the evidence, we can tell him everything. After the burial, they followed Brennan's car to the exclusive Whitmore Club downtown. The lawyer went straight to the private dining room on the 3rd floor, and within 30 minutes, Morrison and Henderson had joined him. Jamal had positioned a small recording device in the restaurant service corridor, hidden among the cleaning supplies where the staff wouldn't notice it but where it could pick up conversations from the adjacent dining room. They waited in their car across the street, hearts pounding as voices began to filter through the receiver. Should have died days ago, Morrison was saying. The medication levels were more than sufficient. Then where is she? Brennan's voice was sharp with anger. Patients don't just vanish from secure medical facilities. Someone took her, Henderson replied. The question is who and how much do they know? Simone and Jamal exchanged glances. This was exactly what they needed, clear admissions of guilt from all 3 conspirators. The funeral went perfectly, Brennan continued. Richard signed the insurance papers this morning, and the payout will be processed within the week. $20 million that should have funded her ridiculous community center nonsense. What about the maid? Morrison asked. She was asking questions at the funeral. Simone's blood went cold. Simone Crawford. She's worked for the family for years, probably knows Isabella better than anyone. If she's figured out the truth. Then we handle her, Henderson said matter-of-factly. Same way we handled the others who got too curious. Others? Morrison sounded surprised. You think this was our first job? We've been running this operation for 5 years. Young heirs from wealthy families are incredibly predictable. They get involved in accidents, and their families are too grief-stricken to ask hard questions. The recording device was capturing every word, but Simone felt sick listening to them discuss murdering people like it was routine business. Find the maid, Brennan ordered. Find her son too. They're loose ends we can't afford to leave untied. Jamal grabbed his mother's arm. We need to go. Now. But as they started their car, Simone saw Morrison's sedan pulling out of the parking garage. They were already mobilizing to hunt down the only witnesses to their conspiracy. Call Dr. Hayes, Simone said, her voice tight with fear. Tell her they're coming for us. The race was on. They had the evidence they needed to expose the conspiracy, but they had to stay alive long enough to use it. And with Isabella still weak and recovering, the responsibility for protecting them all fell squarely on Simone's shoulders. Dr. Hayes answered on the first ring, her voice tense. "They found the clinic," she said without preamble. "Isabella and I are in my car, but there are men watching your apartment building." Simone's heart hammered against her ribs. "How many men?" "2 cars that I can see. Black sedans just like the ones from the hospital." "We're not going home then," Simone said, making a sharp turn away from their neighborhood. "Where can we meet?" "The old community center on 5th Street. Isabella says it's been abandoned for months, but she knows how to get in." 20 minutes later, they were all huddled in the dusty basement of what had once been Isabella's dream project. A place where kids from the neighborhood could get tutoring, hot meals, and a safe space after school. The irony wasn't lost on any of them that they were hiding in the building that had nearly gotten Isabella killed. "We have them," Jamal said, holding up the small recording device. "Everything they said about the murders, the insurance fraud, the plan to kill you, it's all here." Isabella looked pale but determined in the dim light filtering through the basement windows. "Now we need to get it to someone who can't be bought or intimidated." "Who?" Dr. Hayes asked. Brennan wasn't lying about having contacts everywhere. "My friend Elena," Isabella said. "Elena Vasquez. She's an investigative journalist with Channel 7 News. She's been trying to get an interview with me for months about my charity work." Simone felt a spark of hope. "You trust her?" "With my life." "Which is exactly what we're doing." But getting to Elena meant leaving the safety of the abandoned building and risking exposure to Morrison and his team. They spent the next hour planning their route, using Jamal's knowledge of the neighborhood to identify back alleys and side streets that would keep them away from main thoroughfares. "I should go alone," Isabella said as they prepared to leave. "If they spot me, at least the rest of you will be safe." "Like hell," Simone replied. "We didn't break you out of that hospital just to lose you now." They moved through the city like ghosts, taking 3 different buses and walking the final 6 blocks to Channel 7's offices. Every shadow seemed to hide potential threats. Every car that slowed down made them ready to run. Elena Vasquez was working late in the newsroom when they arrived, a petite woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude that reminded Simone of Isabella. "My God," Elena breathed when she saw Isabella. "The whole city thinks you're dead. Your father buried you yesterday." "I know. And that's exactly what someone wanted him to think." As Isabella explained the conspiracy, Elena's expression grew more serious. When they played the recording from the Whitmore Club, she was already reaching for her phone. "This is huge," she said. "This could bring down half the city's elite if other families have been targeted the same way." "But will it be enough to stop them from coming after us?" Dr. Hayes asked. "Once this hits the air, they'll be too busy running for lawyers to worry about covering their tracks," Elena assured them. "But we need to move fast. I want this on the 11 o'clock news tonight." While Elena and her technical team prepared the story, Simone called Richard Whitmore. She owed him that much, to hear his daughter's voice before the rest of the world learned the truth. "Mr. Whitmore? It's Simone. I need you to sit down." "Simone, if this is about those questions you were asking at the funeral, your daughter is alive, Mr. Whitmore. Isabella is alive and she's with me right now." The silence on the other end stretched so long that Simone wondered if the call had dropped. That's impossible," he finally whispered. "I buried her yesterday." "You buried someone else. Someone who looked like her. Isabella was kidnapped and drugged, but she's safe now. She wants to talk to you." When Isabella took the phone, her voice was strong despite everything she'd been through. "Daddy? It's really me. I know this is impossible to believe, but..." The sound of Richard Whitmore breaking down and sobbing came through the phone clearly enough for everyone in the newsroom to hear. 15 years of watching this family, and Simone had never heard the proud businessman cry like that. "Where are you?" he managed to ask between sobs. "I'll come get you right now. Channel 7 News." "But Daddy, there are people who want to hurt me. People you trusted. You need to be careful." "I don't care about being careful. My little girl is alive." At 11 p.m. sharp, Elena Vasquez appeared on television screens across the city with a story that would change everything. "Good evening. I'm Elena Vasquez with a Channel 7 exclusive that will shock you. Isabella Whitmore, the young philanthropist who was buried yesterday after a tragic car accident, is very much alive. And the conspiracy to fake her death reaches into the highest levels of the city's legal and medical establishment." The recording played in its entirety, Morrison's, Henderson's, and Brennan's voices crystal clear as they discussed murder and fraud like routine business matters. Joining me now is Isabella Whitmore herself, along with the people who risked everything to save her life. As Isabella sat in front of the camera, telling her story with quiet dignity, Simone felt something she hadn't felt in weeks: hope. The nightmare was almost over. The arrests began at dawn. Simone watched from the window of the hotel where Channel 7 had put them up for safety as police cars surrounded Brennan's mansion. The lawyer was led away in handcuffs, his expensive suit rumpled and his usual composure completely shattered. Morrison was arrested at the hospital where he'd been destroying evidence. Henderson was found at his funeral home, apparently trying to remove the body he'd used to fake Isabella's death. "3 down," Isabella said, joining Simone at the window. She looked stronger today, the color returning to her cheeks. "But there are others. The men who grabbed me, the hospital administrators who looked the other way, maybe other families who were targeted." Richard Whitmore had barely left his daughter's side since the story broke. He sat across the room now, holding a cup of coffee he hadn't touched, just staring at Isabella like he was afraid she might disappear again. "I should have seen it," he kept saying. "Brennan was handling all our family legal matters. I trusted him completely." "He was good at earning trust," Isabella replied gently. "That's how he got away with it for so long." Elena Vasquez knocked on the door, bringing news from the police investigation. They found financial records linking Brennan to at least 6 other suspicious deaths over the past 5 years, she reported. Young heirs from wealthy families, all handled by the same network of corrupt medical and legal professionals. Dr. Hayes shook her head in disgust. "How many families grieved for children who might still be alive?" "The FBI is reopening all those cases," Elena continued. "But there's more. They found evidence that Brennan was planning to target Richard next. Once the insurance money was secured, your father was going to have a tragic accident, and Brennan would have inherited control of the entire Whitmore fortune through legal documents he'd forged." The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Brennan hadn't just been stealing money, he'd been systematically destroying families for years. "What happens now?" Jamal asked. He'd been quiet all morning, processing everything that had happened. "Now we rebuild," Isabella said firmly. "The community center project that almost got me killed? We're going to make it happen. But this time we do it right. With people we can trust." She looked at Simone with an expression that was both grateful and determined. "I want you to run it," she said. "The Simone Crawford Community Center. You've spent your whole life taking care of people. Now you can do it with the resources to really make a difference." Simone felt tears spring to her eyes. "Baby, I don't know the first thing about running a nonprofit. You know about caring for people. You know about fighting for what's right even when it's dangerous. That's more important than any business degree." Richard Whitmore spoke up for the first time that morning. "Simone, I owe you more than I can ever repay. You saved my daughter's life when I couldn't even see that she was in danger. Whatever you need, whatever resources you want for this project, they're yours. And I want to help too," Jamal added. "I've got 2 more years of high school, but I can volunteer after school in summers." Dr. Hayes smiled. "Count me in as the medical director. After what we've been through together, I think I'd like to focus on helping people who really need it." Over the next few weeks, as the investigation continued and more arrests were made, the plan for the community center took shape. It would be more than just Isabella's original vision. It would be a place where kids like Jamal could get the support they needed to pursue their dreams, where families could access healthcare and legal advice without fear of being taken advantage of, where the community could come together to protect each other. The site they chose was perfect. A renovated building in the heart of the neighborhood where Simone had raised Jamal, close enough to the Whitmore estate that Isabella could stay involved, but firmly rooted in the community it would serve. "Mrs. Crawford," Jamal said one evening as they walked through the construction site, "do you think this would have happened if I hadn't noticed those hands at the funeral?" Simone stopped and looked at her son. This young man who had risked everything to save someone he barely knew, who had used his intelligence and courage to help expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of society. "I think," she said carefully, "that when you see something wrong, you have to speak up about it. Even when it's scary. Even when people tell you to mind your own business. You did the right thing, baby. And because you did, a lot of people are going to have better lives." The Simone Crawford Community Center opened 6 months later, with Isabella cutting the ribbon while Richard Whitmore beamed with pride. The local news covered the opening, but this time the story was about hope and community instead of conspiracy and betrayal. Brennan, Morrison, and Henderson were all serving lengthy prison sentences. The FBI investigation had uncovered a network of similar schemes in 3 other cities, leading to dozens more arrests and the recovery of millions in stolen funds. But for Simone, the real victory wasn't in the headlines or the criminal convictions. It was in the sight of kids from the neighborhood doing their homework at tables Isabella had personally picked out, in the sound of laughter echoing through halls that had once been silent, in the knowledge that she'd helped transform a place of tragedy into a beacon of hope. "You know what the best part is?" Isabella said, finding Simone in her new office on that first day. "What's that, baby girl? This time, when we help people, we get to stick around to see how the story ends." And for the first time in months, Simone Crawford smiled without any fear behind it. The nightmare was over. The real work was just beginning. 1 year later, the Simone Crawford Community Center buzzed with activity that would have made its namesake's heart swell with pride. The morning sun streamed through clean windows onto children bent over homework, teenagers learning job skills in the computer lab, and elderly community members sharing stories in the reading corner. Simone stood in the main hall, watching it all with a sense of wonder that still felt surreal. From cleaning houses to running a community center, it wasn't a path she'd ever imagined for herself, but it felt right in a way that nothing else ever had. The lunch program served 300 kids this week, Dr. Hayes reported, joining her with a stack of reports. As medical director, she'd expanded the center's health services beyond anything Isabella had originally envisioned. And we're getting requests from 2 other neighborhoods to help them start similar programs. "That's wonderful," Simone said, though the numbers still sometimes overwhelmed her. 300 children getting nutritious meals who might not have had them otherwise. It never stopped feeling like a miracle. Jamal appeared in the doorway, now a senior in high school and the center's most dedicated volunteer. College acceptance letters were starting to arrive, full scholarships to universities that had once seemed impossibly out of reach. "Mama, there's someone here to see you," he said, his expression careful in the way it got when he was trying not to worry her. In her office waited a young woman Simone didn't recognize, well-dressed, nervous, clutching a newspaper clipping about the center. "Miss Crawford? My name is Diana Foster. I think my brother was one of them." Simone's stomach clenched as she recognized the haunted look in the young woman's eyes. She'd seen it in mirrors for months after Isabella's ordeal. "One of who, honey?" "One of the people Brennan and his group killed. My brother David died in a car accident 2 years ago." Same story, sudden accident, quick funeral arranged by Henderson, large insurance payout. But David was a careful driver, and he'd been asking questions about some financial irregularities at his company. Diana placed a photograph on Simone's desk, a young black man with kind eyes and a bright smile. "The police say his case is being reopened, but they told me not to get my hopes up. Too much time has passed, too much evidence is gone. But I heard what you did for Isabella Whitmore, and I thought, maybe you'd understand what it's like to lose someone and know in your heart that the official story is wrong." Simone studied the photograph, seeing the family resemblance in Diana's determined expression. She thought about all the other families Elena had mentioned, all the other young people who had died under suspicious circumstances. "What do you need from me? Help me find the truth. I know David's gone. I'm not hoping for a miracle like Isabella's family got. But I need to know what really happened to him. And if there's evidence that could help convict the people who killed him, I want to find it." Before Simone could answer, Isabella appeared in the doorway. "I couldn't help but overhear," she said, settling into a chair beside Diana. "And I think I might be able to help." The FBI investigation turned up references to other cases, other families. If your brother was targeted by the same group, there might be records, financial trails, something. Over the next hour, they listened as Diana told them about her brother's final weeks. His concerns about missing funds at his investment firm, his meetings with lawyers about potential whistleblower protections, his growing paranoia that someone was watching him. "It sounds like David was getting close to exposing something bigger than just insurance fraud," Isabella said. "Maybe corporate embezzlement, maybe money laundering. Something worth killing for." "Can you really help me?" Diana asked, hope and desperation warring in her voice. Simone looked around her office, at the photos of children from the center, at the certificates and awards that recognized their work in the community. This was a good life she'd built, a safe life. Getting involved in another conspiracy investigation would put all of that at risk. But she also saw the photograph of Diana's brother, thought about his family grieving without answers, and knew she couldn't turn away. "We'll help," she said firmly. "But this time we do it smart. No more sneaking around in hospitals or hiding in abandoned buildings. We work with the FBI, we follow proper procedures, and we make sure everyone stays safe." Diana's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. You don't know what this means to me. Actually, I do, Simone replied. A year ago, I was standing where you are now, trying to save someone I loved from people who thought they were too powerful to be stopped. As Diana left with promises to gather all her brother's records for review, Isabella lingered in the office. You know this could be dangerous, she said. If Diana's right, we could be looking at a criminal network even bigger than what we exposed before. I know. But look around, Isabella. Look at what we built from the worst experience of our lives. Maybe this is what we're supposed to do, help families find justice when the system fails them. Isabella smiled, the same bright expression that had lit up the Whitmore estate for years. The Simone Crawford Investigations Agency? More like the Simone Crawford Community Justice Center, Simone corrected. We help people, we find truth, and we make sure families don't have to fight these battles alone. Through the office window, they could see Jamal teaching a group of younger kids how to use the computers, Dr. Hayes examining a baby in the health clinic, and dozens of community members going about their daily lives in a place that had become a beacon of hope. You know what I love most about this place? Isabella said. What's that? It's proof that good things can come from terrible experiences, that people who survive trauma can use it to help others heal. As evening fell and the center quieted down, Simone locked up and walked home through streets that felt safer than they had in years. The community had rallied around the center, creating informal networks of support and protection that extended far beyond the building itself. At home, she found Jamal at the kitchen table working on college application essays. What are you writing about? She asked. The night we saved Isabella. And how it taught me that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they have to. Simone smiled, ruffling his hair the way she had when he was small. You were never ordinary, baby. None of us were. We just didn't know it yet. As she prepared for bed, Simone thought about the journey that had brought them to this point. A year ago, she'd been a maid whose biggest worry was keeping her job. Tonight, she was a community leader preparing to help another family find justice for their lost loved one. The phone rang as she was turning off the lights. Diana's voice was excited, breathless. Miss Crawford, I found something. Financial records David hid before he died. Account numbers, transfer receipts, names I don't recognize. I think this is what they killed him for. Bring everything to the center tomorrow morning, Simone said. And Diana? This time we're going to get them all. Outside her window, the city hummed with late-night activity, some of it innocent, some of it probably not. But in this neighborhood, in this small corner of the world, there were people who cared about justice, who looked out for each other, who wouldn't let the powerful prey on the vulnerable without a fight. Simone Crawford had spent 15 years cleaning up other people's messes. Now she was in the business of cleaning up the world, one family at a time. And she was just getting started.